Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It started on a sweltering summer night in a small town where the McDonald's was always crowded, even at 2 a.m. Most nights, the place hummed with the fluorescent buzz of the lights, the clatter of fryers, and the distant roar of the drive-through speaker. But one night, something was off. A young employee named Kevin had just finished his shift cleaning the dining area when the last customer left. The store was quiet, except for the faint hiss of the soda machine. Kevin was about to clock out when he noticed a man standing near the back door. He didn't recognize him. The man's clothes were filthy, and his eyes darted around nervously, almost too quickly, as if he didn't want anyone to notice him. "Can I help you?" Kevin asked. The man didn't answer. He just kept staring. Kevin felt a chill creep down his spine and decided to head to the manager's office. But as he turned, he saw the man had disappeared. Kevin assumed he'd left through the front, though the doors were locked for the night. A few minutes later, the security cameras started acting strangely. On the monitors, Kevin saw what looked like someone moving through the kitchen, even though he was the only one in the building. At first, it seemed like a glitch, but then the figure appeared on every camera angle, walking through walls, passing into the freezer, and vanishing again. Kevin's heart pounded, and he ran to the front, ready to call the police, only to find every phone line dead. Then the screaming started. It wasn't coming from the speakers or outside. It came from the deep corners of the restaurant. Kevin followed the sound into the storage room, and what he saw made his blood run cold. There were dozens of old tattered uniforms hanging on hooks, each covered in strange dark stains that weren't just dirt. Some of them had the outline of hands burned into the fabric, as if someone had pressed themselves against it in desperation. Kevin turned to leave, but the door slammed shut on its own. The lights flickered violently, and a shadow moved across the ceiling, stretching unnaturally, growing taller and wider. The air turned icy, and Kevin could see his own breath. Then he heard a whisper, low and guttural, repeating the words, "You never leave." He tried to pry the door open, but it wouldn't budge. The shadow descended, taking a rough, human shape, but distorted as if it were a reflection of someone who had been trapped for years. Kevin realized in terror that these were the spirits of former employees, people who had disappeared during late shifts and were never reported, swallowed up by the building itself. Hours seemed to pass. The shadow circled him, murmuring names of employees who had vanished over decades. Kevin couldn't move. The air pressed down on him like water. Then, as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The shadow recoiled, the lights returned to normal, and the doors clicked unlocked. Kevin ran, never looking back. The next morning, when the new morning shift arrived, the cameras were wiped clean, the storage room looked normal, and Kevin's story was met with laughter. "Just nerves," the manager said. But when Kevin left, he swore he saw faint handprints in the condensation of the windows, pressed from the inside, and a faint whisper that sounded like it followed him into the daylight. "You belong to us now." From that night on, Kevin never returned to McDonald's, and neither did the whispers or the shadows, at least not in the light of day. But on the nights when the town sleeps and the fryers hiss in silence, those who work the graveyard shift swear they see someone, or something, watching from the corners, moving too fast, just out of reach, waiting for the next person to stay too long.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 2.
It started as a regular Friday night shift at the McDonald's on the outskirts of town. Emma, a college student working part-time, had stayed late to cover for a coworker. The restaurant was empty, save for the hum of the freezers and the distant flicker of the neon sign outside. She wiped down tables and restocked napkins, feeling the usual quiet tension of late-night work. Around midnight, a man entered wearing a heavy coat, though the summer heat made it seem odd. He didn't approach the counter, but lingered near the door, muttering to himself. Emma called out, "Can I help you?" but got no response. The man's eyes were hollow, almost too dark to be natural. She felt a shiver creep down her spine, but chalked it up to the long shift. Moments later, she noticed that the man had disappeared. Confused, she walked toward the restrooms to check the security cameras. That's when she noticed something terrifying. The cameras showed the man standing at the counter, but in the footage, he didn't move naturally. His head twitched violently, and his limbs jerked like a marionette. Even stranger, he never appeared in the footage outside the camera's view, yet the front door's bell had rung. Emma's phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. "I see you." Her hands shook as she tried to call the police, but there was no signal inside the building. The lights flickered, and the deep hum of the freezers grew louder, almost like whispers echoing from the vents. Then she heard it, a slow, deliberate tapping on the glass of the drive-through window. She hesitated, peeking out. No one was there, but the tapping continued, moving along the window panes as if someone or something was circling her. She ran to the back door, but it wouldn't budge. Trapped, she turned toward the kitchen and saw a shadow moving along the walls. It didn't walk, it slid. The shadow paused behind the fryer, and a cold, guttural laugh echoed through the empty restaurant. Emma grabbed a mop handle, trembling, and swung it at the darkness. The shadow dissipated for a second, only to reform closer, almost inside her. She screamed and bolted toward the office, locking herself in. That's when the cameras began to glitch violently. Faces appeared on the screens, faces that weren't human, twisted, grinning, watching her. One of them raised a hand and pressed it against the glass of the camera lens. The next morning, the manager arrived to find the restaurant empty. The doors were locked from the inside, but there was no sign of Emma. Her belongings were scattered across the floor, and the mop handle she had wielded was bent backward as if snapped by an unseen force. On the security footage, the last frame showed her standing at the counter, staring at the camera with eyes wide and black, whispering something inaudible to the darkness behind her. To this day, the McDonald's remains open, but employees swear the late-night shifts are cursed. Cameras sometimes pick up figures that vanish when approached, and some claim to hear Emma whispering warnings in the vents. No one knows where she went or what came for her that night, but anyone who works alone past midnight tells the same story. Something waits, just beyond the fluorescent lights, patient, hungry, and unseen.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 3.
It started as a normal Friday night at a McDonald's in a quiet suburb. The lights inside were bright, the smell of fries thick in the air, and the faint sizzle of burgers on the grill like a lullaby for anyone hungry. But that night, something was off. The new night shift worker, a young man named Ethan, had been trained just days before and felt uneasy stepping into the empty parking lot. The manager, a stern woman named Carla, handed him his apron and gave him the usual instructions. Nothing about her tone suggested anything sinister, but there was a strange rigidity in her eyes that made him shiver. As the night went on, Ethan noticed the usual customers were missing, replaced by an eerie emptiness. At around midnight, the drive-through speaker crackled to life. "Welcome to McDonald's," Ethan said nervously, expecting no one, but a scratchy, distorted voice answered, "I'm in the parking lot." Confused, Ethan went to the window. No one was there. He checked the security cameras. Every corner of the lot was empty. Shaking off the chill, he returned to the counter. Hours passed. Then the fryer started by itself. Flames hissed and smoke filled the air, though Ethan had turned it off earlier. He ran to shut it down, but when he opened the lid, the basket was full of burgers, cooked, wrapped, and neatly stacked, though no one had been near the kitchen. Then came the tapping, a soft, irregular tapping from the dining area. Ethan walked slowly, trying to convince himself it was a branch hitting the window or the wind. The chairs were empty, but the tapping persisted. It grew louder, more deliberate, like fingernails on a table. Ethan's heart pounded. He looked down at one of the tables and froze. On the table, smeared into the sticky surface with what looked like ketchup, were words, "I see you." Panicked, Ethan ran to the manager's office, but Carla wasn't there. Instead, the lights flickered and the PA system crackled. A voice, deep and hollow, said, "It's feeding time." The fryer burst into flames, the smell of burning meat choking the air. Ethan scrambled to escape, but the exit doors wouldn't budge. The temperature dropped sharply, and he could see his breath in the air. In the reflection of the glass doors, he saw something standing behind him, a figure, featureless, humanoid, dark as a void, staring without eyes. He blinked, and it was gone, but the shadows in the dining room seemed alive, crawling along the walls toward him. When the morning crew arrived, they found Ethan slumped on the floor, pale, shaking, staring at the ceiling. He could barely speak, but when asked what happened, he whispered, They never leave. They hide in the fryer, in the soda machine, in the corners of the ceiling. They watch and they wait for the night shift. It's McDonald's, but not the one you know. It's hungry. Ethan quit that day. The store manager pretended nothing happened, telling the new night worker that he had fainted from exhaustion. But employees who worked nights after that spoke of strange occurrences: fries moving on their own, burgers disappearing mid-assembly, shadows that didn't match any human. Some claimed to see figures lurking in the vents, their shapes twitching unnaturally as if tasting the fear in the air. To this day, the McDonald's on that quiet suburban street still operates. By day, it's normal, filled with children laughing and the smell of fries. By night, however, the lights flicker just enough to remind those working there that the hunger never sleeps, and some orders are never meant to be served.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 4.
It was a quiet Tuesday night in a small town, the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, and the streets seemed to close in after dark. The local McDonald's, the only fast food place that stayed open past midnight, had always felt off. Employees whispered about strange things: the flickering lights, cold spots in the kitchen, and the feeling of being watched even when no customers were inside. No one ever spoke openly about it, but everyone knew something wasn't right. A young night shift worker named Jamie had just started. They were eager to make a little extra money and didn't mind the late hours. On their first night, the restaurant was nearly empty, save for a lone trucker who sat silently in a corner booth. Jamie went about their usual tasks, taking orders, frying fries, and wiping counters. Around 2 a.m., the lights above the dining area began to flicker, once, twice, then more violently. Jamie blamed the storm outside and tried to ignore it. Then the tray drop alarm from the drive-thru went off repeatedly, even though no cars were there. Jamie went to check the cameras and saw something chilling. The drive-thru lane was empty, but the speaker box was vibrating as if someone were speaking into it. When Jamie listened closely, there was a whisper, a low, raspy voice that said, "You shouldn't be here." Shaken, Jamie went back to the kitchen, only to see the ice cream machine start on its own, grinding and whirring, though no one had touched it. The sound echoed through the empty restaurant, metallic and unnatural. Then came the smell. Something rotten, like decayed meat and burnt sugar, filled the air. Jamie gagged and ran toward the back room, thinking maybe a freezer had gone bad. The back room, however, was empty. All the freezers and storage cabinets were locked and functioning normally. But as Jamie turned to leave, they saw it, a shadow in the corner. It wasn't human. It crouched unnaturally, its limbs too long, head tilted at an impossible angle. Its eyes glowed faintly red, staring directly at Jamie. Jamie froze, unable to scream. The shadow slowly crawled toward them, moving in jerky, unnatural motions. Jamie finally bolted, slipping on spilled soda and crashing into the counter. When they looked back, the shadow was gone, but the smell lingered, suffocating. Panicked, Jamie ran outside and jumped into their car, heart pounding. The trucker from earlier was gone too, leaving no footprints in the lot. Jamie didn't return to that McDonald's, and the manager pretended nothing happened. Other employees, when asked about that night, either gave vague excuses or shook their heads. Months later, Jamie discovered online that the same McDonald's location had been built over an old slaughterhouse that had burned down in the 1970s. Workers there had vanished mysteriously over the years, and rumors spread that the building itself absorbed something dark. Jamie never worked a night shift again, but sometimes, driving past the McDonald's, they swear the ice cream machine still whirs on its own, and a faint whisper follows the cars through the drive-thru lane. "You shouldn't be here." The locals still go, laughing and eating like nothing happened, but the night shift employees know better. And sometimes, when the restaurant is empty and the lights flicker, they hear whispers from corners where no one stands, and shadows that move on their own. Something in that McDonald's doesn't belong to this world. It's always watching, always waiting for the next person who stays too late.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 5.
It was a Friday night in a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other and nothing really happened after dark. But that night at the local McDonald's, something happened that no one would forget. A group of college students had pulled in for a late-night snack after a long night of partying. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered under the flickering streetlights. The drive-thru was closed, but the indoor area was still open, dimly lit, and quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerators in the back. The students joked, ordering burgers and fries, not noticing the odd way the cashier kept glancing at the security cameras. There was a tension in the air, almost imperceptible, like the restaurant itself was holding its breath. Once they sat down, one of them noticed the restroom lights flickering. The group laughed nervously, assuming it was just bad wiring. But then, a man in a McDonald's uniform appeared from the hallway leading to the kitchen, carrying a mop bucket. His eyes were too wide, his smile too sharp. He didn't speak, just stared at them as he pushed the bucket along the floor. One of the students waved at him, and he responded with a low, almost guttural chuckle that made their skin crawl. Suddenly, the lights in the dining area went out. Total darkness, broken only by the red glow of the exit signs. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. In that silence, they heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from every direction. Their phones had no signal, and when they tried to turn on the flashlight, it flickered as if struggling to come alive. Panic set in. They ran toward the exit, only to find the doors locked. One of them screamed, and from the darkness, the man in the uniform appeared again, moving impossibly fast. His mop bucket was now on the floor, abandoned, and he reached toward them with hands that seemed longer than humanly possible. They tried to push past him, but it was like the air itself resisted them, thick and heavy. One of the students tripped and fell, and in the brief seconds before he could get up, the man whispered something. So low and close, it was like the words were crawling into their skulls. They could hear the sizzle of something frying from the kitchen, but it wasn't the normal sound of burgers. It was wet, almost like skin cooking on a pan. Then the lights flickered back on. The man was gone. The students scrambled outside and jumped into their car, speeding off. They didn't stop until they were miles away. When they finally looked back, the McDonald's was dark and empty, as if nothing had happened. But one of them noticed something in the rearview mirror, a shadow standing behind the counter, watching them leave. Days later, they tried to report it to the police, but the McDonald's had been shut down. Employees were gone, records were missing, and no one in town could remember anyone working there in the last month. Surveillance footage had been wiped. The only evidence left were the receipts in their pockets, which, when examined, had strange, illegible symbols printed where the order numbers should have been. They never went back, and every time a McDonald's commercial came on the TV, they felt the same chill, the same creeping fear, as if that uniformed man was still waiting for them somewhere, smiling in the shadows.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 6.
There's a story out of Maine that still circulates among ex-employees of a McDonald's off the interstate, the kind of late-shift nightmare that makes people quit food service for good. It was December, bitter cold, and the night manager, a man named Travis, was running the graveyard shift with only 2 teenage employees. Business was slow, the kind of shift where you wipe down the counters 3 times just to stay awake. Around 2:30 in the morning, a car pulled into the lot and just sat there with its headlights off. That wasn't unusual. Truckers and teenagers would sometimes nap there, but what unsettled them was how long it stayed. The silhouette of someone clearly sitting behind the wheel, but never moving toward the drive-thru or the door. After 15 minutes, the youngest worker, a girl named Melissa, nervously asked if she should take out the trash. Travis told her to wait until the car left. But she didn't listen. She grabbed the bag and walked out the side door. She later swore she could feel someone's eyes on her the entire time she crossed the lot. As she turned back toward the building, she froze. The car door had cracked open, and someone was halfway out, crouched low as if waiting for her to look away. She bolted inside, pale and shaking, insisting that whoever was in that car was trying to lure her closer. Travis tried to calm her down, but when he glanced outside, the car was empty. No driver, no passenger, just sitting there idling. He decided to call the police, but the landline went dead mid-dial. He pulled out his cell phone, no signal, even though the restaurant usually had full bars. That's when the motion sensor lights around the dumpster flicked on, one after another, as if someone was circling the building. All three of them locked the doors, retreating to the kitchen. Then came the knocking, first on the front glass, soft and deliberate, then harder, until the sound echoed through the empty dining area. Melissa peeked over the counter and swore she saw a face pressed against the glass, grinning too wide, eyes reflecting like an animal's in the dark. But when Travis looked, nothing was there. The cops finally showed up around 4 a.m. after a neighbor reported strange noises at the restaurant. They found the three employees huddled in the freezer, too terrified to come out. Outside, the idling car was gone, but the officers found footprints in the fresh snow circling the building over and over again. Bare footprints, no shoes, no socks, just human prints pressed deep into the ice, leading off into the woods. The store stayed open after that, but Travis quit the very next day, and Melissa swore off night shifts for good. What makes it worse is that over the years, other McDonald's night staff across the country have told eerily similar stories. Cars that pull up but never order, silhouettes watching from the lot, and knocking on the glass when no one is there. Nobody ever sees them come in, and nobody ever sees them leave.